source projects, ideas, problems, solutions from communities, and then say, here is a vetted solution. The community, real Detroit, gave me this solution, gave me this thing that they would like to accomplish, that you would like to do. How can my hands be best used by you?
I think that's a great idea, but I think because there's also an educational gap, that it tends to be a shutdown. Like I have people who I can invite to a conference like this, and they're gonna be silent. They're gonna fall back because so many people have so much education, and they're not gonna feel like what they have to say is gonna be measured on the same scale as what everybody else has to say. Because institutional education is sometimes valued higher than my street knowledge.
And we value that internally that way. I mean, just for the record, I dropped out of high school, I dropped out of college, I've never finished anything in my damn life. So, I mean, from an institutional credential place, I probably have less than everybody. Damn near 89% of people at this conference.
I think people need to know that.
Right circles. You put yourself out there. You put yourself in position, and you
And I was blessed to have parents who read to me every night before I went to bed, and I have a love of language, and I figured out how to play that to my advantage.
But now, this talks to, if I may, this talks to your point. We talked about this. What you just said, that's because this requires your folks and you to come to this space.
That's right.
Exactly.
What we need is those folks to come to your space.
That's right.
Because you aren't going to hold back in your space. And so a lot of the models that have set up are about this, are talking about where are the parents at the teachers' meetings, because they're working, they're doing stuff. You got to change how you meet.
That's right.
So what we've got to do is create some spaces in those neighborhoods, at those events, that is their comfort level. Let's put the onus on some of the other folks. If their intentions are pure, they need to go out and hear some stuff. And maybe it's not said the right way they used to hearing it, but that's what they need to hear.
That's right.
Then you gotta create something that, like some combustion or something by bringing different things together if you're going to change it. If you're gonna say, we'd love to change, but you gotta come over here for us to change.
Right.
Or we'd love to appreciate what you're doing, but you gotta come over here. And so there's some give and take there, but I do think that some of these models need to be changed so that the folks with the quote-unquote power are in the situations where the power is in the neighborhoods, and let them be in that position.
I wanted to quickly say something as quickly as I can. I also came to your table and I bought a shirt. So I came to, and it's awesome. And I have some connection with folks here. My family comes off of Columbus Street between Dexter and Grand River.
All
so,
right. Yeah.
I know that neighborhood. I came up through that neighborhood. But what I do is these uncomfortable conversations and this blank canvas kind of philosophy that people have, I try to remove that, because what I do is I do African American history tours and presentations mainly about Detroit's African American history, but I do other African American history too. And so these racial conversations, this racial history and all of that, it gets part of an educational process rather than a debate, process, and people get to understand that there's not a blank canvas. A black community was formed originally around the fight against slavery. So you had this Underground Railroad activism, which businessmen also come out of. William Lambert, George the Baptist were great businessmen, because Cresby wasn't giving out grants for the Underground Railroad. Right. So then you move to this period of Paradise Valley where you have 67 blocks and 9 to 12 blocks of 350 black-owned businesses in the 1920s. So they had that, and it wasn't no startup week for them either. They had to do this without, touching base with all of these great thinkers and investors in Detroit. And so then you have so there's a history there, and this history is connected to faith, the building of faith institutions, educational institutions. It's built on this freedom, this fight for freedom, and civil rights, and it's built on fighting, and sometimes that was violent. And of course, we know the 1967 rebellion would be just one piece of that, but there were other issues like that too, Ocean Sweep and others. So to try to give people a base knowledge, and so I came to this program, Native Newcomer. I'm an old comer. So I've been here, and not only have I been here, I've done what I could to jump into that deep, rich history, particularly the African American history of Detroit, and try to give that to as many newcomers as possible. And they can go back to their own spaces and give that as much of that as they can. I always tell people, everybody can't go on my tour, but you came on it go tell somebody something you learned on this tour today that you didn't know before. And so that's really what I think, that it needs to be some kind of entry level, some kind of Detroit 101, and I can be the African American History 101 part, but there needs to be some of that for many of the newcomers, and some of the old comers need to have that base knowledge too. So I'm hoping that in any way I can talk to folks here and help try to move that process along.
I want to say the same thing to you. Literally, if you are asking a question or making a comment, and to the panelists, to the audience, write it on a Post-it, put it on my board so that I can codify that.
Okay.
Because that's a challenge. How do we do a better job of transmitting our history as a city to the people of the city, whether they're new or old?
Well, how have we been doing it? You know,
Right.
like you're doing it, and I think what you're doing is amazing. But what I didn't hear you say is like the white role in that. Like
Yes.
what created those problems in the first place, right?
Yes.
Why were black migrants coming from the South forced to live in Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, right? Because of red line, they weren't allowed to live in like homes. They couldn't.
Racial restricted covenants,
Right.
red line, all of those.
Exactly.
I don't want to give everything. Got to take my tour.
I think it brings up this bigger issue of we like to talk about how to solve problems without owning how they became problems in the first place.
And that was one of the discussions Luther and I had right before this. You know, Chris Rock has this great quote where he talks about black progress, and he says there's no such thing. Right? There's white progress. That's saying there's black progress is like saying that black people one day woke up and said, you know what, we don't want to be slaves anymore. We're done with it. We're over it.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you for your time, but I really don't like this plantation so much, I'm gonna go. That's not how that should happen, right? At some point, the person who is in power
Right.
releases some power. And then we call that the progress of the oppressed. That's crazy. So on both sides of this, recognizing that there is power in the neighborhoods, there is power in the native Detroit base, and that the power that native Detroit base holds has to decide how to allow newcomer progress, and that the non-native base or the non-black base of Detroit needs to decide that inclusion is a real thing that actually matters. On both sides, we have to figure out what we can own.
So I think where the challenge for me comes in, like, how do we chip away at this like huge gap, right? You know, like this gap. How do we chip away at that? And if we're thinking about it as like a group addressing a group and fixing the problems of those groups, it becomes really insurmountable. But if we take the initiative individually as human beings and walk through life in a way that is actually courteous and respectful, and maybe not intentional every single day because we just can't be on every single day, right? But walk by someone and say hi, right? Like just say hey, and then also know that when you say hi to that person, they have a story, right? And that story is no better, no worse than yours, it's theirs. So I think owning that